Welcome to the Vital Spirit podcast. I'm Dr. Kelly Livingston, a naturopathic physician and your guide to a new health reality, one that connects body, mind, and spirit. Together, we'll dive deep into the art and science of holistic healing. Through working with hundreds of women through midlife transitions, I've discovered something profound. Most of our physical and emotional challenges are rooted in a maladaptive stress response. And true healing begins when we regulate our nervous system. Each episode will explore complex health topics in simple, empowering ways, uncover the deeper wisdom within each of us, and share practical tools for nervous system regulation to help you awaken your vital force and create lasting wellness. So, if you're ready to reconnect with yourself, your health, and your purpose, let's begin this journey together so you can experience life more fully human and deeply healed. What should I take for Candida? What's the best protocol for SIBO? Do I need to treat mold before I deal with my hormones? Should I start hormone replacement therapy? Would an antidepressant help? Have you ever treated Lyme disease? These are questions that patients bring to me every single week. And it's completely understandable because, you see, we live in a medical system, or we operate in a medical system rooted in a reductionistic model. Find the part that's broken, name it, target it, fix it, sometimes even cut it out. But this kind of medicine, while brilliant in acute care, falls apart when applied to chronic, complex conditions. And it certainly doesn't address the obstacles to cure or the nuances of human existence and human suffering on the path to healing. This reductionistic model really reduces healing to an algorithm. It treats your fatigue as a mitochondrial issue, your anxiety as a serotonin issue, your gut as a SIBO protocol. But what if we're asking the wrong questions? What if the deeper truth isn't found in the pathogen, but in the terrain? What if the question isn't, what do I have? What germ is it? But what is the state of my terrain? What if the symptoms aren't the problem, but they're the expression of the body's effort to heal? What if your symptoms aren't even evidence of dysfunction, but evidence of the body trying to adapt to a terrain that is undernourished, overburdened, or constantly feeling unsafe? Welcome back to the Vital Spirit podcast. I'm Dr. Kelly Livingston, a naturopathic physician and the creator of the Vital Spirit method and the owner of Roots Deep Medicine Clinic. These are the sponsors for our episode. And today we're talking all about terrain theory and why reclaiming a holistic, vitalistic philosophy of health just might be the most radical act of healing in today's world of medicine. If you haven't listened to my episode on why having a health philosophy matters, I highly recommend you check that out as a companion to this episode. Today, we're diving into germ theory versus terrain theory, reductionism versus vitalism, symptom suppression versus true healing. This week has been a week of many patients coming into me and asking similar questions to the ones I opened this episode up with, and really wanting to know, what do I do for this? How do I treat that? Should we run this lab? And again, it's completely understandable when we've been programmed to think about our health in this reductionistic way, when we want to target something and remove it. We want to take an antibiotic or an anti-inflammatory. Where in that is the healing, though? Where in that is the tending to our terrain? That's what we'll talk about today. So let's take it back to the 1800s. And there were two scientists who shaped the way that we think about disease even today. You've likely heard of Louis Pasteur, who taught that microbes cause disease and who gave us germ theory, that disease is caused by an external pathogen, and Antoine Béchamp, who offered terrain theory, that the internal environment or milieu of the body determines whether disease can take hold or not. Modern medicine chose Pasteur, but the philosophy of vitalistic naturopathic medicine chose Béchamp, and so do I. It's reported that on his deathbed, Pasteur said, "The microbe is nothing, the terrain is everything." This one sentence really captures the difference between reductionistic and holistic medicine. Reductionism says, find the bug, kill the bug, cut the part out, suppress the symptom. The body needs to be controlled. Holism says, ask why the bug is thriving. What has weakened the terrain? What is the body trying to tell us? How is this all connected? And vitalism says there is an intelligence within you, a self healing, organizing vital force that is always working toward balance. What does the body need to heal? The body is wise. Remember from our episode on the seeds of health, the body heals. This is that naturopathic principle of vis medicatrix naturae, or the healing power of nature. It's not an idea, it's an actual force within us, and we can either work with it or we can work against it. So definitely go back and check out episode 1 and 2 of this podcast. And there's more information there for you on the philosophical principles of naturopathy and the therapeutic order. So you can really begin to grasp this paradigm shift. Now, enter Dr. Henry Lindlar, one of the foundational figures in naturopathic or nature cure. In his 1919 book, The Philosophy of Natural Therapeutics, he wrote, "The real causes of disease are violations of nature's laws." And I touched on this in a previous episode as well. Germs do not create disease any more than flies create garbage. So I want you to imagine a scenario where maybe you have a piece of rotten fruit that fell behind your garbage can, and you keep putting out ant traps because you see all these ants walking around your kitchen and you think, I need to catch these ants. And maybe it's starting to smell a little bit, so you've been putting out some air fresheners or lighting candles to mask the smell. Well, none of this is going to get rid of that piece of rotten fruit behind the garbage that's creating the ants and the smell. So, this is very similar to how symptoms are not the disease, they're manifestations of the body's effort to heal itself. So, those ants and that smell are not the disease. They're not the things that need to be removed. The fruit actually is. And the smell is the sign of the rotting fruit, essentially. And a lot of the symptoms that we might suppress or try to get rid of on our healing journey are messages from our body about what path we actually could take to resolve the issue. He writes about how the body is intelligent, self-regulating, and governed by natural laws, and it's capable of regeneration if given the right conditions. We all understand this. We've all had a wound that heals, right? We think, wow, magical, my skin is healing. We don't think I need to do anything additional to help that skin to heal. Of course, there might be a time and a place where a wound is infected, or we don't have the ability for that wound to heal because we have diabetes. So there can be nuances to these situations, but essentially, if given the right conditions, that wound is going to heal. This is what modern reductionistic medicine forgets. And it's the fear that is a result of this forgetting that manifests in what I see every day in practice. Women are chasing a diagnosis or a lab result when their nervous system is frozen, or their digestion is stalled and their vital force is suppressed, but no one has asked questions about the level of stress in their life or even the food that they're eating. I want to ground this in a real life example. So let me tell you about Emily. Emily had chronic candida symptoms, chronic UTIs. She had a history of a positive small intestinal bacterial overgrowth test. She had histamine reactions such as hives and chronically itchy skin. She was fatigued all the time. She had mood swings, and she had a lot of labs from a lot of doctors. She had mycotoxin testing, oat tests, stool testing, hormone panels, you name it. And her supplement protocol was pages deep. She had a whole bag of supplements. And I have a whole episode on lab tests, right? I'm not saying there's not a time or place for labs. But here's the thing, she wasn't healing. And I think that was because the focus was always external. It was always on what new diagnosis can this doctor tell me is going on? What can I take? Kill the pathogen, right? Treat that layer, run the next test, whack-a-mole with root causes. And she came in afraid, scared to eat anything, really frozen in her nervous system. She wasn't having bowel movements. She wasn't even exuding a lot emotionally. She wasn't crying. She was just in survival. She definitely didn't need another protocol, although absolutely I do use protocols when indicated, right? But she really needed to reconnect with her terrain and to understand how to work on creating the conditions for health, because she had always been taught kill, suppress, anti, right? And never how to heal, never how to be pro body, pro terrain, pro mind body. When you look back at what Lindlar taught around true healing and the fact that it follows the laws of cure, healing happens from the inside out, from more vital to less vital organs, and in reverse order of symptom appearance. So, for Emily to understand that process and start to slow down in the asking of external, what is this? What is that? Well, who can help me? What can I do? Someone tell me what to do, right? And to start to really turn inward and understand the healing process was very impactful for her. Understanding that healing was a process and not a protocol was very helpful because we paused the kill off, we paused the attack and the antis, right? And we really went more for terrain restoration and for sustainable changes in her diet and lifestyle that would give the body what it needed to heal. So we focused on the safe and sound protocol to help regulate her nervous system. We focused on starting to improve with daily bowel movements and support gut healing with gentle bitter herbs before meals. We worked on lymphatic stagnation and self lymphatic massage, along with making sure that she was hydrated. And we did start some gentle work with homeopathy and flower essences for emotional release and journaling, walking outside in nature, and some deeper time for soul connection and reflection. So, really just taking time during the day to go outside and get quiet and listen to nature and see what thoughts and emotions and feelings came up versus trying to suppress them. Essentially, we were creating the conditions for her body to remember its own wisdom. So, the safe and sound protocol and nervous system regulation tools, such as breath work, were really to help her body to feel safe so that it could get into the parasympathetic healing state. And then making sure that she was hydrated and getting enough minerals and electrolytes and exposing her eyes to sunlight in the morning were, again, signs to her body that it had what it needed to heal. We were literally giving it minerals and hydration, all things that it needs to do its work. And we worked on really simple, warm, grounding meals. She had been doing a lot of cold smoothies in the morning and a lot of binders because she was under the impression that a lot of her symptoms were from potentially a chronic infection. And I started to speak with her more around embracing slow moving time with her meals, cooking the meals, smelling the herbs as she was cooking, and really a slower pace to her meal time. And that was very helpful for her. And I think journaling and utilizing the Seeds of Health journal to reflect on whichever flower essence or gemotherapy we were using was really powerful for her because she would utilize those journal prompts to ask questions that she hadn't been asking around her healing process and around some of the patterns that she's exhibited throughout her life that maybe weren't serving her. And gently opening up her detox pathways, again, with more drainage remedies versus more aggressive detoxes, which just hadn't served her. Again, there's a time and a place, but for her, she really had to return to that slower, more gentle, supportive healing process. Her skin cleared and the itchiness cleared up. Some bloating that she had had went down. But I think more importantly, she felt really connected to herself again. And that to me is true terrain medicine. And there certainly will be that time and place for a therapeutic diet or a protocol. I utilize these things in practice, but I've noticed over the last 12 years as a practicing physician that as the world of functional medicine and testing has gotten more popular and there are health influencers on social media, there's a lot of bypassing happening in the healing process. And essentially, I think slowing down and getting in touch with what our symptoms are trying to tell us and having daily commitment to rituals and routines of healing that really give our body what it needs are so key. You can't bypass the basics and the foundational steps. It's still such a reductionist way of thinking, right? To say, oh, it must be my MTHFR or my parasite. And I think as there's this short form content out there, which I know I'm participating in by even having a podcast and posting things on Instagram. But this short form content, it really promotes this reductionistic way of thinking of it's got to be this one thing. And if I just figure that out and resolve it, then I'm going to be fine. And I think we really need to focus much more on holistic care of the human being, of our terrain, not of a single gene or pathogen, and really treating our symptoms as signposts, as guides, and not as enemies or things that we need to suppress. So I think Emily started to heal not because we found the perfect antimicrobial, but because we really created the conditions for her body to remember its own wisdom and do what it's made to do. So, what is the terrain anyway? The terrain isn't just the gut microbiome, although we do start with the gut brain axis, as you know. And that's just because I need a realistic starting point for patients. And I've found that that is the best one in my Vital Spirit method. But the terrain is the totality of your internal ecosystem. So, yes, it does include your gut flora. It includes your mucosal immune system. It includes your emunctories, your organs of elimination, your bowels, liver, skin, kidneys, lung. It includes your nervous system tone, your breath, your blood, your lymph, your emotional and spiritual alignment. In yogic philosophy, I think this lines up a lot with our thinking around koshas. And koshas are the 5 sheaths of human experience. So you have your physical body, you have your energy body, you have your mental emotional body, you have your wisdom body, and you have your bliss or spirit body. And you could look at this certainly through the lens of Jungian psychology, where I would say terrain includes the unconscious. So symptoms might emerge as symbols, as patterns. A chronic skin rash might reflect boundary violations. Digestive stagnation might symbolize undigestive life experiences or inability to process emotions. Perimenopausal rage might represent the archetypal wild woman repressed for decades, right? And your terrain health will be impacted by your state of hydration, your body's ability to circulate blood and lymph, your nervous system's ability to have flexibility through sympathetic fight or flight and getting back to parasympathetic rest, digest, and heal, emotional flexibility, spiritual coherence. So essentially, the seeds of health that I designed over many years working with patients are the practices, the daily rituals and routines that create terrain health. And all of our layers of being affect our terrain. When one is stagnant, others will compensate. So we've talked before on how stagnation in any layer or aspect of life, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, is the breeding ground for dis-ease. Stagnation is never something that we want to see in the healing process. So personally, myself, for example, you might notice I'm a little bit congested. I've been fighting some sort of cold. And again, I'm not going to just focus on what is this germ, but I'm going to focus on my terrain. So I'm going to do things like hot Epsom salt baths. I'm going to hydrate. I might utilize some herbs to support my immune system, and maybe some of them have an antimicrobial aspect to them. But I'm also going to grab my handy dandy Louise Hay book, How You Can Heal Your Life, and I'm going to look up what is the emotional or spiritual message from this congestion in my sinuses, and I'm going to reflect on that. So true terrain healing is working on all aspects of this. I've had healthy food in my diet and avoided dairy and sugar because they'll make more mucus, or they'll be a little bit more of a breeding ground for dis-ease, and they might suppress my immune system's ability to compensate and get back to balance, right? I'm going to make sure I'm sleeping. All of these aspects of my health are what I would call tending to my terrain, right? So reductionism might be asking, what is that microbe? What is the thing I need to kill? What gene made me more susceptible to it? What pill or antibiotic do I have to take? But the body is not a machine. It's a living, breathing expression of nature. And Lindlar warned us that medicine that chases symptoms but ignores the cause is not curative. He wrote that suppression is not cure. True healing occurs only when the cause is removed and nature is allowed to do her work. So, again, in naturopathic medicine, we talk all about removing the obstacle to cure. So, if I wasn't sleeping and I wasn't hydrated and I wasn't providing my body with nourishment to mount an immune response to whatever germ might be brewing inside of me, then I'm not tending to my terrain and it won't be curative. And just suppressing the symptom of maybe my mucus production, which is actually my body's way of getting rid of the germ and supporting the healing process, suppression of that symptom is not going to lead to a cure. And that's why the Vital Spirit method is built on regulating the nervous system, getting the body into the healing state, restoring elimination through healthy emunctories and nutrition, rebalancing hormones and neurotransmitters gently, and reconnecting with our soul, our spirit, our purpose in life. All of these layers play a role in our healing journey. So we really are not here just to manage symptoms. We're here to liberate our vitality, to increase our vital force, hence the Vital Spirit method. When you reduce a woman to just her cortisol curve or her hormone panel or her stool test or her TSH, you miss her. You miss her longing, her pace of life, her grief, her story. You miss her mother wound, her cultural suppression, the spiritual disconnection that no lab can diagnose. And again, I run labs. I look under all of the rocks. I remove the obstacles to cure, but the end goal is for tending our terrain, for terrain healing, for holistic healing, and looking at all of the person, not just, oh, you have low ferritin, take some iron, right? Terrain-based medicine asks more along the lines of, is the body safe? Does the body feel safe to heal? Is the soul heard and expressing itself in this life? Is the terrain nourished? Is the spirit engaged? And I like to think about our body-mind system as the way that our soul or spirit really interacts with and engages and experiences life. And so tending to our terrain and keeping that mind-body system healthy is how we can allow our soul to do what it's meant to do and move in the world and experience and have that full human experience. And that was really my goal with designing the Vital Spirit method and sharing this podcast with you. It's not just a protocol, it is a path. And I hope that it brings you back into relationship with your inner healing and what it is that your soul is meant to do and experience in this life. And when we do experience dis-ease or symptoms, if we follow the philosophy of vitalistic medicine or even homotoxicology, which is a system developed by Dr. Hans Heinrich Reckewig, we can understand that the body goes through predictable stages in its attempt to deal with toxins, stressors, or imbalances. And this predictability, I think, can take out a lot of the fear in the healing process or the confusion. So I'll quickly go through these, and I could certainly have another episode on this, but these 6 stages can help us to map where a patient is in their healing process. And the first step is excretion. So the body's trying to eliminate the toxin naturally through sweat, urine, stool, mucus. My sinus congestion is a great example of that. My body's trying to excrete and respond to something that it doesn't want there, that it wants to get back to homeostasis with. And therefore, moving it out of the body is going to be its solution to that. And then the next step is inflammation. If it can't be eliminated, then our body will respond with inflammation. Now, we always talk about how chronic inflammation can lead to disease, but inflammation is actually a positive response. Inflammation such as fever, pain, swelling is not the disease. It's our body's effort to heal. And then the next step is deposition. So if inflammation is suppressed or prolonged for a long period of time, then toxins get stored in tissues. And you might see chronic fatigue or cysts forming or chronic congestion, which this won't be. It'll be gone in a couple days. And then next is impregnation. So the toxins are going to begin to interfere with cellular function. So eczema might get worse and your skin might thicken even further and be more irritated, or gut dysbiosis kind of digs its heels in further and you're more bloated or constipated, or you see early signs of an autoimmune disease. And then we have degeneration where tissues begin to break down. So that might look like arthritis, leaky gut, or high levels of intestinal permeability, neurological changes and degeneration. and then dedifferentiation. So this is the most advanced state where the body loses its ability to regulate cell growth. And this is where cancer or severe autoimmunity can appear. And I think Lindlar and he both were quite aligned that symptoms are not the enemy. They are the signs of where the body is on this journey and where intervention should meet the natural direction of healing. So, yes, we create the conditions of health, we water those seeds of health, and then we work through the naturopathic therapeutic order and determine what direction do we need to go, what level of intervention is necessary to help the body get back to where it needs to be. So instead of suppressing, we move the body backward through these phases from degeneration to inflammation, and then from inflammation to elimination. And this is what we mean when we say true healing follows the direction of cure. So in the Vital Spirit method, this terrain restoration is very layered, and there might be flares of symptoms, there might be flares of inflammation, right, as we move back through that process. So remember, in the Vital Spirit method, we regulate the nervous system so the body feels safe enough to initiate detox, to initiate the healing process. We support the liver, gut, lymph, and kidneys to actually excrete those stored toxins. We interpret new symptoms not as setbacks, but often as healing responses. I do a lot of counseling with my patients around the healing response and the signs and symptoms that our body is giving us that are actually good that we want to listen to and track. We see the return of past symptoms or old rashes or past discharge patterns as the body retracing its steps to vitality. So reductionism might say your eczema is flaring, suppress it, put a steroid on it. But vitalism would say the body is trying to excrete again. Support it, don't fear it. Yes, figure out what it's excreting, but don't suppress it. In Jungian psychology, we might say that return of symptoms is like the return of the exiled parts of the psyche. They don't show up to ruin your life. They show up to be witnessed, integrated, and transformed. So yogic philosophy might think about this around our trust in tapas or the purifying fire. Not all discomfort is pathology. And sometimes it's in that very heat or the very moments of pressure or discomfort that melt away what no longer serve us. And certainly in my work with archetypes and patterns, emotional patterns, and ways we store emotion in the body, so many of the women I work with have these aha moments where we can recognize what that part was doing that was serving us or keeping us safe or doing the best it could in the moment. And we can start to move through those patterns that we don't want to be exhibiting anymore because they are impacting our terrain or our ability to heal. When we look at illness or disease as a teacher in this way, and illness is not an error, right? It's maybe an invitation, an initiation into deeper listening, a confrontation with the unconscious patterns that are controlling our life, or a recalibration of the life you've outgrown. It can be a wonderful mental reset or reframe. Jung taught us that illness often contains the seeds of transformation. So where there is fear and uncertainty, there's also a call to growth. And healing comes only from that which leads the patient beyond himself and beyond his entanglements with the ego. I see this play out time and time again. In that sense, the terrain is not just physical, but it's psychic, emotional, symbolic, and it's definitely sacred. Your terrain includes all those parts of you that you've silenced. It includes grief you haven't digested. It includes the ways that you override your natural rhythms and cycles. It includes not doom scrolling at night anymore, right? Because your circadian rhythm is saying, please, I just want to go to sleep. To heal comes into alignment with the laws of nature, both physical and spiritual. So I really encourage you to go download the Seeds of Health journal, which is your daily guide to nourishing your terrain. And if this episode spoke to you, I invite you to begin again, not by chasing the next lab, but by tending your terrain. Yes, I know I have a whole episode on labs. I have a whole lab interpretation guide. And yes, there is a time and a place. But also, tending your terrain is so key on this journey. So revisit those episodes on health philosophy, the Seeds of Health, and download your journal. And don't miss the upcoming interview I have in a few weeks with one of my mentors as we explore the forgotten history of medicine before we lost sight of the terrain. So make sure you download and subscribe so you don't miss that interview. And as always, share this podcast, please, with someone in your life who would benefit from terrain healing. And remember, your body is not broken. You are not a diagnosis. You are a sacred terrain. Tend to it, trust it, and come home to it because it remembers how to heal.